Hello everyone and welcome to my final project presentation for History 40B. The title of my lesson is Redefining Freedom, Race and Gender in 19th Century America. In this lesson, I will explore how race and gender were contested and transformed during the 19th century using 5 powerful primary sources. Now let's begin. To understand these changes, we first need to look at the historical context. In the 1800s, the United States was rapidly expanding westward. At the same time, debates over slavery and gender equality intensified. Slavery was deeply rooted in American society, but abolitionist movements gained momentum, especially in the North. Meanwhile, women began organizing to demand rights in education, marriage, property, and voting. These two movements, abolition and women's rights, challenged the foundation of American democracy and redefined who counted as a citizen. Our first source is a powerful speech by Frederick Douglass, delivered in 1852. It's titled "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Douglass, a formerly enslaved man, used this speech to highlight the hypocrisy of celebrating freedom in a nation that still allowed slavery. He asked, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn." Through moral argument, biblical references, and emotional appeal, he revealed the deep contradiction at the heart of American liberty. This speech helped awaken many white Northerners to the moral urgency of the abolitional cause. It also shows how race defined the limits of citizenship and belonging. Our second primary source is the Declaration of Sentiments written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and others at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the first women's rights convention in U.S. history. The document was modeled after the Declaration of Independence, but expanded its language to include women. It stated, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." The Declaration listed specific injustices faced by women, such as lack of property rights, unequal education, and denial of the right to vote. It marked the beginning of the formal women's suffrage movement, and its idea would endure for decades. This thought shows how gender became a political category for reform. The third source is Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, published in 1852. While it is a work of fiction, it had real political impact. Stowe portrayed enslaved African Americans as deep human, moral, and emotional rich, countering racist stereotypes. One character exclaims, "It's a shameful, wicked, abominable law." This refers to the Fugitive Slave Act, which made it illegal to help escaped enslaved people. The novel made slavery cruelty visible to Northern white readers, especially women, and inspired sympathy for abolition. Stowe's book transformed public opinion and added emotional momentum to the anti-slavery movement. It reminds us that literature can be a tool of resistance and reform. Now let's move to our fourth source, a short but unforgettable speech by Sojourner Truth titled "Ain't I a Woman?" delivered in 1851. Truth was a formerly enslaved black woman, and she challenged both racism and sexism in one bold speech. She pointed out that while white women were demanding gentleness and protection, black women like her were working in fields and being whipped like men. She asked, "Ain't I a woman?" This line exposed that racism within the mainstream women's rights movement, which often excluded women of color. Her speech demands that we think intersectionally about how race and gender operate together to shape inequality. It's one of the earliest and clearest calls for what we now call intersectional feminism. And our fifth source is not a speech or a novel, but a Supreme Court decision, the Dred Scott uh, Stanford from 1857. In this case, the court ruled that black people, whether free or enslaved, could never be U.S. citizens and therefore had no right to sue the federal court. Chief Justice Taney wrote that black Americans had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. This decision legally codified white supremacy and deepened the divide between North and South. It directly contradicted the ideals of liberty and equality expressed in earlier sources. The Dred Scott case reminds us that the law itself can be a tool of oppression. So, what do all these sources have in common? Together, they reveal the freedom in 19th century America was a contested idea. Who counted as free? Who was a citizen? Who had rights? Activities like Douglas Stanton, Stone, Truth, and even legal cases like the Dred Scott challenged the exclusion of black Americans and women from full democratic participation. These sources showed how race and gender were not fixed. They were debated, resisted, and redefined over time. And here I give three discussion questions like how do race and gender overlap in 19th century reform movements? And the second is why did white women and black women sometimes express feminism differently? The third is how can primary sources help us understand whose voices were included or excluded in American history? And I want to talk about my personal reflection. I've always known about slavery and the women's rights movement in broad terms, but this project helped me see them as personal struggles told in the words of people who lived them. I was especially moved by Sojourner Truth's speech. It made me think about how even within progressive movements, certain voices are left out. I also saw how important primary sources are in understanding history, not just as facts, but as living expressions of resistance, hope, and change. If I were to do this again, I would probably try to include more visual images and maybe some class discussion questions to make the class more interactive. My advice for future students is choose sources you feel connected to. It makes you teaching more authentic and powerful. And yes, I do think this lesson could be effective in a classroom. It's honest, it's challenging, and it uses real voices to tell the story of how freedom was redefined. This is the works cited page. Thank you very much for watching my presentation. That's all.